Support WrestleTalk!
Enable notifications.
Hello and welcome to WrestleRamble. This is Luke Owen, I'm Ollie Davis, and today is a mailbag special. And we'll be asking, are smart crowds really killing wrestling? If we could change one thing in the history of professional wrestling, what would it be? And much, much more. Or maybe just one or two questions more. If you want to go straight to any of those discussions, click the timestamps in the video description below, or stay right here, where we're going to say subscribe to the podcast. As always, that's good if you do that. It's like this. It's exactly the same as this, but no video. It's just audio. And what else can you get?
Extra rambling on the intro and on the outro. And if you leave us a review on iTunes, you do get a cheap pop from us, which is always good fun.
Which sounds like this.
Yeah, woo, woo, woo.
But it would have your name added in there.
We've had some great cheap pops so far. Unicorn on the Cob was like that. That's a winner right there. That was a great cheap pop.
That's an all-time top 10.
That's an all-time
top 10 review that was.
Yeah.
But I mean, podcast, Luke, how much would that cost me?
Well, I mean, the funniest thing is about podcasts is they cost you nothing. They're free, mate.
Luke, if that's the case and they're totally free and I can just easily access them right now, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, just do it now.
Subscribe. Well, isn't that a nice bit of awkward plugging?
Wasn't it just?
So, shall we get on to the mailbag question? This is one we haven't got. We've had this in our backlog for ages.
Do you know what? And it's really funny as well because we have had this more or less since we started doing the WrestleRamble, me being here full time. We've had this email in our backlog where we've had Patreon questions that we've had to get through first, and we felt really bad. We actually were making it a bit of a joke that this email was being treated like Matt Damon on Thingy, wasn't it? You were like, oh, we've just run out of time and we can't do it anymore.
You have just reminded me.
Oh yeah,
that we need to reveal who won the fantasy booking. Which we didn't do.
We're not delaying it, but we do need to give this out first
because this is a thing that we forgot to do twice. It was meant to be last Wednesday. We forgot it in the Saturday one. So yes, who won the fantasy booking warfare from 9 days ago? I think it is now. Which was rebooking the debut of Bobby Roode.
Yes, absolutely.
You went for a overblown, complicated, overbooked thing where two brands would war over having him.
We're competing over it, which I thought elevated both brands and really elevated Bobby and the United States Championship.
Whereas I went for a really traditional, classic, just straight up singles feud while elevating someone else. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but you are obviously the judge of who's better, and out of 3,783
what a great number that is.
60% voted for Luke.
Yes, mate! That's my first fantasy booking warfare, and I think like 2. I think that's mate. I was really chuffed to win that one because I was very proud of that Bobby Roode one.
Yeah, well, I won Baron, and I also won the SummerSlam predictions.
Yep.
So for the month of August,
I still lost.
I now hold the title. Whoa, yay, I've got it back, but it doesn't really matter because the Wonder Ollie secret is out there.
Yeah, we didn't really come up with anything to kind of put on the line. We didn't want to just do something for me and something for you. We need something that both of us could do.
You can't shave your beard.
I can't. That's all the suggestions ever are. Shave your beard. It's not going to happen. So we can't really do that. And we haven't had any other better suggestions.
Yeah, so of course, this is a new month now, September.
Ah, mate.
First of the month.
Well, sort of.
First of the month.
It was actually on Saturday.
It was Friday, isn't it?
Yes.
Whatever day it is.
Yeah, whatever day it was.
Please do send in.
We are recording this on a Thursday.
Yeah, it's quite complicated time-wise. So it's like an NXT taping, isn't it?
Yeah,
We're going to grow our hair out suddenly.
If anyone's watching this, it'd be like, they're wearing the same T-shirts they were wearing in Saturday's show. It's because we're recording Saturday's show and today's show after the other, and we recorded lots of Patreon shout-outs as well. It's been a WrestleRamble heavy day.
We've been in here for a while. It's not the nicest smelling
Certainly
place
not,
now.
No. There are going to be people just moving away from me left, right and centre when I get onto the tube to go home.
But more so.
More so than usual.
More so than usual. So Luke won that one, but overall I won August, whereas you won July. So now I guess this is the rubber match.
I guess
this
so.
This is a condom month. to use a thing I've just made up. Yeah, if you can come up with anything to put on the line, so a forfeit at the end of September
that both of us can do.
That both of us can do. So, like, I don't know, we don't have a paintball gun. Waxing. We can wax a part of our body.
I've got a wedding, man.
Yeah, but you're not going to have your chest out.
Yeah, but I've got the wedding night as well.
Oh, and you're going to be filming that? Does the photographer follow you in there?
Well, no, but my lady partner will be
Okay,
there.
what do you think we should do? Because I'm getting married. I'm Luke. That's all I hear about these days. I can't do that. I'm getting married.
Oh, in all fairness, I can't do that sort of stuff because I am getting married.
I know, I'm just being facetious. Is there anything off the top of your head that you can do?
No, pain stuff we could probably do, which would be fun as long as I don't break anything.
Yeah, I guess we could, but like what?
Well, I think someone said
Just
that
paper cuts.
Someone said that, like, I think someone said in the comments once about dressing up as wrestlers and reenacting entrances, like out in the streets and whatnot. So that's always a possibility.
I don't like the sound. See, public embarrassment is
it's not
my
it's not forte.
forte.
Okay, so here's the problem.
Can do it on a video. Quite fine.
Yeah, here's the thing, Oliver Davis. You and I have come up with this concept of doing these monthly competitions because YouTube viewers like these sort of monthly competitions where two people compete against each other and there's an eventual winner and the eventual loser has to do something at the end of that month. We've come up with this concept, not really an original concept. Multiple channels have done this sort of thing. We're not claiming to be original here.
You will tell us who else has done this concept.
Absolutely.
Quite clearly
and probably done it better. Because we've come up with this concept, neither of us really want to do any of the punishments. Because anything that gets suggested, I can't do. I'm getting married. You can't do because you get too embarrassed.
I mean, it's a shame. So What Culture did one quite recently, so we couldn't do it, where they drink all the milk.
Oh man, I used to do that in my teenage years. Me and my mate used to go up to the park to do that. You just down 4 pints of milk and then throw up everywhere.
Why was that your pastime?
Because it's just something we would do. Just like, do you fancy going up to the park and just drinking some milk?
And vomit.
And vomit.
So I've never done it. But I like milk.
Yeah.
And when you see people do the cinnamon challenge and you're like, well, it can't be that bad.
It's so much harder than you think.
But of course it is. Of course it is. But, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I could probably take the Hell in a Cell bump. Of course I couldn't, but there's a stupid idiot inside my head that goes, I could do that. It's not so special, mate. And that's how I feel about the milk. I'm like, can't be that hard. But obviously it is hard because everyone who's ever done it throws up.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I like milk.
Yeah.
I could probably do it.
I suppose I really shouldn't do it now because I'm meant to be mostly vegan these days.
Maybe we should do the cinnamon one then. I don't know. We've talked about this far too long already. We've got a mailbag to dive into.
Once again, feel like we're skipping over the question that's been sat in our inboxes for the last couple of months. So the story I was going to tell prior to this email coming, us getting to this email, is we were watching NXT this morning. It is a Thursday, so NXT was on last night. And this emailer is always at NXT shows. She's been watching the WrestleRamble since we started doing this. She's been in touch with us quite a few times. She's actually, I've had conversations with her about NXT because I've been a bit critical of the crowd sometimes. And she, as part of that crowd, is obviously defensive of that crowd. And that's absolutely fair enough. That's a really good thing to be doing. And it's got to the point now where every time we see her in the crowd at NXT, we'll just go, there she is. There's Karen.
Yeah, there, mate.
There's Karen. There's our mate Karen. Hello, Karen. And I messaged her today. I was just like, every time I watch NXT now, I always spot Karen. I don't know what it is. I was like, there she is.
What you should do is...
she's the new Izzy.
Yeah, to make it not weird at all, you should just, whenever you do see her on TV, just tweet her. I can see you.
It's not a weird thing.
I can see you.
It's a fun interacting with the fans thing.
Smiley emoji face. I can see you. Maybe get a screenshot, zoom in on her way too close. I can see you.
I can see
Picture.
You. But she messaged me back
Watch
today
it late at night.
But the point is, she messaged me back today to say, like, at least NXT don't cut me out of their shows, unlike these rambling guys who have been sitting on my email for the last couple of months. I was like, I mean, those guys sound like dicks.
That is sassy. Well, let's dive into this. Okay, so here is the email that we haven't answered for ages.
Yeah. So do we actually need to give some context for this, or is the context provided in the email?
I think the context is provided in the email. Yeah. Karen goes to NXT. She lives, I assume she lives locally to in Orlando near the Performance Center where NXT is filmed. So she goes to a lot of the tapings we often see her in the front rows of the shows.
And I think I'd made a comment about the NXT audience.
Right, yeah.
And I had said that I'm not overly fan of the NXT audience sometimes.
Yeah, because I think if you go back, it was probably more like, I hate the NXT audience, they ruin everything.
I probably called them dicks, and I said I called them entitled dicks, because it was the Asuka, Nikki Cross last man standing match, where the crowd spent more time chanting, "We can't see."
Yeah. Oh yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
So this is what Karen, on hearing Luke's outrageous
comments,
you shot on the NXT crowd.
Yeah.
Karen emailed in and said, "Dear Oli and Luke, each time I watch Ramble and negative things are said about the Full Sail crowd on the programme, it hurts. I'm one of the loud and proud folks at ringside each month, and there are so many factors which contribute to the atmosphere of Full Sail Live. While many of us try to shut down the Smarky fans, a large portion of the crowd are university-age boys who think they are funny when they are exceptionally offensive. The problem is the security in Full Sail is more likely to punish those trying to break up or quell the jerks ruining the atmosphere for everyone. People are afraid to stand up because we'd be the ones more likely to be thrown out, especially when on the hard cam side." So that's the crowd you can see behind the ring. It's opposite the camera that films it. "Unfortunately, some at Full Sail don't observe the number one rule of progress in the majority of their life, i.e., don't be a dick. At a taping in February, some monster screamed, 'Peyton, show us your..." A word for a cat.
But it's not, though. That's what we thought it was, because
is it not?
Karen started it out, and I messaged her back saying, like, I thought it was a really disgusting thing to say. Actually, what the crowd was chanting was, "Peyton, show us your penis," and insinuating that she is a man.
Okay. During a quiet moment in her match against Asuka. So just imagine that, Asuka and Peyton Royce are fighting, and someone quiet moment.
Which would be a great match.
Peyton, show us your penis. Like, it's quite juvenile. Yeah. A fight nearly broke out in the stands, and Peyton was devastated. As a woman who is a fan of wrestling, I was offended. As a person sitting by 10-year-old Izzy, who is the super fan of Bayley, she's brought up in every video package about Bayley, and other children, I was mortified. What upset me the most was that security and the WWE staff did nothing, absolutely nothing. People were begging security to throw the individual out, but their blanket response was, "No one can prove it was him," when there were like 30 people all pointing in the direction of the individual responsible, who was loudly continuing his tirade. She and Asuka wrestled through the match, and many of us cheered louder to drown this guy out. Unfortunately, it seems the microphones over the crowd tend to be over the bleacher area, and there is no penalty for people being terrible individuals. I'm not asking for apologies for you or to censor your work in any way. I just believe you deserve an open dialogue from a loyal fan. Sincerest regards, Karen.
See, it was a great email, which is why we felt bad that it's taken us so long to get to it, but as we had Patreon stuff to get to. But it also, and particularly after SummerSlam weekend, it really does open up that conversation of, do smarky crowds ruin wrestling? Because for me, and this is why I have now stopped myself saying the Full Sail crowd, and I just say parts of the Full Sail crowd, as well. We should really say parts of the Full Sail parts of the WWE universe. It is the smarky fans who do often sometimes ruin NXT shows for me, because those are the people you hear. It's always the loud minority that you hear over the silent majority. It's always just like that. Those just comments that you're like, oh god, that just winds us up. And it reminds me of when they NXT were doing their first show on the road. They were going to do their first takeover outside of the Full Sail Arena, and every time they mentioned it, the crowd booed. Oh, I should say the crowd. Portions of the crowd kept booing, and Kevin Owens used to get really annoyed about it, saying like, "You want NXT to grow, but every time it does grow, you boo." It was a great little like heel promo by Kevin Owens, which is why he's great. And yeah, and it reminds me as well of it was a post-WrestleMania, it was the WrestleMania after Raw, during a women's match. It was probably back in the time of Divas matches. It was probably like just a random 8-woman tag match. And the crowd, man, the stuff they were chanting, which wasn't Cena sucks or you guys suck, it was you suck Cena, you suck Uso. And I was like, come on, guys. And when they chant that and then laugh, that always leads to the chant of, we are awesome. They're like, no, you're not. You're awful people.
Yeah, it is quite a rare instance, though.
It is a rare
I'd
instance,
say.
yeah, absolutely.
Like,
I mean, those chants haven't happened since.
But of course, there was Beach Baller Mania, which ran wild.
And We Are Awesome chants were happening out throughout SummerSlam weekends.
And to be honest, the first two Raw after WrestleManias, those We Are Awesome chants were well deserved. The first time with the Fandango and Dolph Ziggler's cash, was Dolph Ziggler's cash in the year after? But when the Raw after Mania first became a thing, like, that crowd was something. I was telling people about the crowd.
Yeah, but
that's how fun it was.
But the crowd were into all the wrestlers. They weren't into themselves.
They were into themselves.
They were chanting "We Are Awesome," but they were also massively into the wrestling. Whereas, like the wrestling side of that started to die away, and the "let's get ourselves over" started to grow. And that, unfortunately, is sort of the mentality a lot of the wrestling community feels about the Full Sail audience. They're just there to get themselves over rather than watch the wrestling in the ring.
When, as Karen points out, Karen goes there, I presume all the time, because we frickin' see her all the time on TV, on the network.
You got all the screen caps, right?
Most of the NXT diehards are just happy to go along and watch and be entertained and cheer the right people.
Absolutely.
But these Smarky fans are probably just like, just a gang of about 4 people who do start up these nonsense chants. Mm-hmm. Now, here's my view on it, because I always like to approach things from a logistical, practical standpoint, because it's all well and good saying smart fans are ruining wrestling, or people shouldn't chant Peyton, show us your penis. I know he said penis, show us your penis. Don't know what that says about my subconscious, but or Beach Baller Mania and stuff like that. But like how do you stop that? Because wrestling is exploiting the stupid adolescent side of everyone. Like, the whole point is to go to this live event and everyone pretends, almost like a pantomime, which is a very camp form of theatre in the UK, that these semi-naked people in the ring play fighting, that it's real. And that there can be comedy involved in this. Comedy matches are some of my favourite things. The promos are often that you can range to, like, hot promos where it's very aggressive, or to comedy promos which are just as good and fun. But so when you're exploiting that side, when wrestling really needs that side of childhood or adolescent naivety and just whatever that is, unfortunately that is going to bring bad stuff with it. I'm saying it's impossible to have one and not the other. And unfortunately, the way the NXT crowd is, because I think you've got the same groups of people coming there. It's next to a university, as you said. You're going to get the occasional drunk student in there. It's very difficult to I mean, how do you legislate against this? How do you stop this from happening? One of my favourite things in the world is to get drunk at independent wrestling shows, because it helps me get invested that little bit more, because I can just check the cynicism a bit, and I'm just like, yeah, but I like to think I'm cheering the right people and cheering and booing the right people. But I was at Progress in the early days, which was very much, the crowd were almost the third person in the match. That's where I cut my independent wrestling teeth. And that was very much, the crowd are a part of this. Independent wrestlers do this thing where they go, ha, 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 hey-ya, hoo, hoo. And they do sound effects with every strike. And we found it hilarious. And I was one of the people doing it, to go, ha, hey-ya, hoo. And it would make the crowd laugh, but it was still fun in the ring. It was just all fun. I don't know how the wrestlers thought about that, but at the end of the day, it's the fans who've paid to come and see it, and everyone was on the same page. I'm just going to put myself over here. Back when Noam Dar used to wrestle for Progress before he went over to the Cruiserweight division in WWE, I did the greatest chant I've ever done. So, Noam Dar was from Scotland, so one of Scotland's national dishes is a deep-fried Mars bar. Which is, yeah. And when Noam Dar came out, people would chant deep-fried Mars bar.
Very good.
At one point in the match, can't remember who it was against, Noam Dar got someone in a armbar. And I just yelled to a completely quiet crowd, deep-fried armbar. Everyone clapped. Yes. But, Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, don't say, like, stop saying this, because I just don't see how you stop this from happening.
Well, okay, so there's two sides to this, and I appreciate all the points that you've made. I'm not sure I overly agree with everything that you've said, but there are two sides to this. So WCW back in the day, they used to book their arenas particularly about how many bars were close by. Because Kevin Sullivan used to tell these sorts of stories about WCW all the time. So they would book areas where there were like how many bars there were per square mile, because that means you'd get more drunk fans who are either going to come to the show because they've already bought tickets, or are going to buy a ticket because they're now drunk and want to go and watch a wrestling show. And that's why WCW crowds were very, very rowdy. As Kevin Sullivan would say, they weren't going to church on a Sunday; they were going to all the bars. So that's how they got their really, really passionate crowds, or passionate sounding crowds. But those people were going there to watch wrestling. They weren't there to go and start chants about themselves, or "we are drunk," or like "China, show us your whatever." They weren't there to do that sort of thing. Not really China, because it was WWF, obviously, but Asia was their version. They weren't there to do that sort of thing. They were just there to see the stars that they liked, the popular people that they knew, and recognise, cheer those, and boo everyone else. So that worked for WCW. That has since changed, where, as you say now, people do get drunk and go to these shows, and as Karen says in her email, go to these NXT shows and just chant things that they think are funny, as opposed to cheering for wrestlers, booing heels, and this, that, and the other, and enjoying the show. They're just there to go and just chant stuff. And with NXT, I think it's heard more because there are a lot of moments of quiet from the NXT crowd. Understandable, it's a long taping schedule. You're there, you're there for hours on end watching very, very short matches, and probably not a lot of in-ring segments. So it's just match. By the end of the night, you're probably exhausted. You've probably seen Roderick Strong wrestle 3 times. This, that, and the other. The third time Roddy comes out, his reaction is not going to be as loud as it was the first time. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult because I'm not the sort of person who thinks you should censor people in crowds. I think that you should shout down people who chant stupid things. But yeah, you can't stop people chanting stuff. In the same way that you couldn't stop people bringing in beach balls. However, I just look down on those people who bring in beach balls because I think they've done that for the wrong reason. So I think that's more or less where I stand on it. So the question, are Smarky fans ruining wrestling? And to a degree, I think yes. Only because I'm not saying that is a blanket statement. Yes, Smarky crowds are ruining wrestling, because I actually, going back to the NXT audience, that NXT audience is the reason why Finn Balor is a star. It's the reason why Sasha, Charlotte, and all these people were just like seen as NXT was seen as the place to be. You go to NXT shows because the crowd are so hot. There is the only brand in WWE where everyone in the crowd seemingly were into the actual wrestling that was going on, as opposed to Raw and SmackDown, where you just cheer entrances and you cheer finishes. And also because of NXT, you could argue, is why we have the women's revolution on the main roster. Because on the main roster, when you had the 4 horsewomen and you had all those other female stars down there, on the main roster, you had Divas Wrestling, where it was given 5 minutes on the pay-per-view, it was considered to be the piss break, wasn't taken seriously at all. And you had a lot of the female talent up on the main roster going like, why can't we be more like NXT? And it took them a little while, but eventually they just brought up some of that talent and we said like, now we're going to start taking women's wrestling seriously, because women's wrestling was invented then. I think that's the WWE
years ago.
Yeah, that's the WWE narrative, wasn't it?
Well, no, it was Mae Young wrestled for about 70 years.
Yeah,
and then wrestling it started in WWE.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's
2015.
Yeah, I think that's more or less the narrative that they've driven. Yeah, but like women's wrestling at its apex, and the reason why it was taken seriously is because of that hot NXT crowd. So yeah, I mean, I don't think Smark fans are ruining wrestling to a degree, but I do think they are ruining it to a different degree, because we've had so many conversations about crowds in recent times. We've done so many videos where we brought up how the crowd were being unruly, how the crowd were trying to make it more about themselves, how the crowd weren't watching the matches. And I just feel that within wrestling, we shouldn't be talking about the crowd as much as we currently do. However, sorry, and I will let you make your point. I will stop talking. Kevin on the Attitude Era podcast has always said that he can't enjoy a match if the crowd aren't into it, because the crowd are the third person in the match, and if a crowd are bored throughout the match is difficult to watch. Is the final point I will make.
Yeah, well, it's as much as we talk about beach balls and this not very nice chant at all.
That is not a very nice chant at all.
I mean, it's more juvenile,
It's so juvenile.
than it is really super offensive, because I thought it was the cat version.
Well,
of
that's
P,
what I thought it
which
was
would
at
be
first,
awful.
which is really awful. Yeah.
But we do also criticise crowds for being quiet. Mm-hmm. Sitting on their hands, not making an atmosphere. So you've got these two extremes, like Smarky fans just out for themselves, and the dead audiences aren't into anything. And then, it's like anything. Smarky fans aren't ruining wrestling. Smarky is just a very derogatory way of saying very, very passionate. I would say we're Smarky fans.
No,
We've got a YouTube channel about wrestling.
Yeah, I suppose I was a part of the Smart Mark community, Smart Mark forums. Shout out to TSM back in the day.
Yeah,
I love the TSM forums.
And it's like, but with any part of society, you'll have this, huge group of people, and just by I think if I was to say to you, and this is a Joe Rogan thing that he always brings up, you've got 100 people in a room. How much would you bet that there is at least one idiot in that room? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's probably a conservative estimate.
I was going to say, yeah, that's probably a bigger number than that. Yeah.
That one person in a room of 100 is an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got wrestling. So what's that? Like 3, 4, 5 million people in the world, maybe, who watch wrestling, WWE at least. That means you're dealing with. I can't. My maths is no good now. But I think that is to be 100%. It's like 10. Oh my God! It's a lot of people. You've got a lot of idiots, right? In that amount. So it's just human nature. What this is.
It is human nature that there will always be idiots.
Yeah.
Also, I was going to say as well, is Smarky a derogatory term for fans like us? Because I actually think that Smarky fans has become a derogatory term from the Smart Mark. So you and I are considered to be Smart Marks because we think we know all the inside track on wrestling.
Right.
And we know inside baseball terms like finish and heat and things like that. So that makes us Smart Marks as opposed to just being marks. And then from that, there's those people who are then just out for themselves, and those are Smarky fans.
Oh man, I don't even know.
That's how I always thought it was broken down. You have marks who are just watching this because wrestling is on and are not really interested in the backstage stuff. Then you have smart marks who read the Observer, and then from that you have the Smarky fans who are the Raw After Mania crowd.
I mean, you've got
a portion of them.
It's all derogatory. It's all traced back to derogatory. The idea of a fan being a mark is a wrestler. There's an easy person I can sell a gimmick to.
If you watch heist movies where you have someone who is tricking someone, that person is called a mark.
Yeah,
because you are tricking them.
And the smart mark is the person who knows that you're tricking them. So yeah, that's the bit of it. But I'm very sorry that that's happened in the NXT crowd.
And I'm very sorry if you thought that we were being derogatory toward the NXT crowd. We should say portion of the crowd.
Our next question comes from Moises Coronado. I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation, so you're welcome. And he writes, if you can go back in time, like any era, or change one thing about the WWE, what would it be? Mine would be keeping kayfabe alive and not exposed, and somehow wrestling might be portrayed as a real sport and not rubbish. So, Luke, what one thing would you change in wrestling history or in general?
It's weird as well, because I think you and I have come at this from very different things, because I've just seen your notes there, and I do very much agree with everything that you have said.
We should say the first one, because, it goes without saying, we'd stop a lot of the deaths.
Yeah, unprotected chair shots, just remove those from history. The diving headbutts, just remove that from history as well, because that led to a lot of...
I would have... Chris Benoit, that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, obviously, that sort of thing.
Owen Hart.
Yeah.
I would change that.
Absolutely, yeah. So those sorts of things,
But those are very definitive answers. It wouldn't create a nice 5-minute discussion piece. No. So... those out of the way, what would you change?
So,
Luke?
actually, I'm going to be coming this at a very different angle that you have in your ones, even though I very much do agree with the other ones that you've got on here. If there was one thing that I could change in WWE, it would be the period of between 2005 and 2009-10. Actually, maybe in 2003, 2004. Sort of like that period where Ring of Honor and TNA were starting to come up and make some moves. And if I'm changing something just about WWE... I would change their idiotic policy that they had, which was these smaller guys can't get over. Do you know what we need? Big muscly dudes. That's what the kids want to see these days, which is not what people wanted to see. It's why people stopped tuning into WWE shows and really haven't gone back. That's why we got these sort of low TV ratings. And I wonder if, had they just ignored that stupid, idiotic 80s mentality that they had and looked at what the independent circuit was doing and looked at guys like AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, Elix Skipper, James Storm, just looking at all these guys who were tearing it up on the independent scene and having these amazing matches. And look at them going like, actually, yeah, do you know what? We need to give them put them on our TV shows. We need to make them make them the stars of this product rather than just having big roidy dudes who like, do you know who Mordecai? He's the guy that we should be pushing on TV. Maybe WWE would be in a very different place now.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, because that is such a dry spell of WWE.
It's awful.
And it comes around the same time as the celebrity guest hosts and the anonymous Raw GM.
Exactly, yeah.
A dark period.
A really dark period. And you'd have also got those guys when they were in their prime as well, like like a P.E. Williams, that kind of guy. You put him up onto the main stage. It'd have been great.
So I started, I was just writing down some ideas. They're here. Initially, I was like, God, I wish the CM Punk storyline was done much better.
Yep.
So you had the pipe bomb, then the Money in the Bank match. Two of my favourite wrestling memories ever. Blowing the kiss to Vince McMahon through the crowd.
And off he goes.
And then they could have done so much with that storyline. But it was just old-fashioned wrestling.
Hours of conversations that me and my friends had around that time of like, I don't know what they're going to do.
What
like,
could they do?
What could they do here? And we like fantasy booked so many different scenarios. Like, I wonder if they've got a working relationship with Ring of Honor, and he's actually going to go to Ring of Honor and defend it. Love him to go around to these independent circuits and just defend the WWE Championship.
But it's not that.
No, okay.
Because I was like, actually, the year before was Nexus.
Certainly was.
And you could have, like, CM Punk was just one guy. You could have made a megastar, sure. But maybe Nexus, you could have had like 3 or 4 megastars. And this would have been the launching platform for them. If I'm going for a numbers game, I should choose this one, right? And then I thought, wait a second. There's an even bigger version of this about a decade ago. The Invasion.
Yeah.
So the Invasion was another big thing that they could have done right and made an even... kept hold of all those wrestling people. Before you jump in though, it's not that either. Because as you were speaking about ROH and TNA, I was like, I am approaching this in the wrong way also. If I could change anything in wrestling, WCW would still be a company. As bad as it was at the end.
Well,
Who's to say that it couldn't have, like, TNT's bought out. There's the AOL Time Warner merger, which many people put the blame on for getting WCW the can. Maybe they say we're going to bring in some of our own people, TV writers mixed in with a few great wrestling minds. They're going to head it up, and WCW and WWE just carry on. There's the 2 major nationally televised promotions that are just carrying on, and Ring of Honor takes over the ECW slot. TNA is like a really strong 4th. And then you're like, because what we've got now is WWE, and it tries to manufacture this conflict of competition, which is what drives innovation and change. That's why the Monday Night Wars were so good. And you're forced to create new stars, like where Stone Cold Steve Austin came from. You take chances, it's risks, it's exciting. But we don't have that. We've just got WWE. So if I was to change one thing, it would be that WCW was still an entity, and they were both still warring, and they both kept each other on their toes, and they were still innovating, and it was always neck and neck. It's
funny as well, because I've been listening to Tony Schiavone's podcast, What Happened When. It's basically the WCW version of Something to Wrestle With. And the episode that I was currently listening to was Greed 2001, which was their final pay-per-view. It's the pay-per-view that we've had on sort of intermittently throughout the day here in the studio. And Tony Schiavone makes a really excellent point, and Dave Meltzer made this point as well in his Observer review at the time. And they were watching it, it's like, we had a really salvageable product then.
Yeah.
That final pay-per-view, Dave Meltzer, I'm going to paraphrase it, but he said, this show is sad because it shows that this company, there's still life in there. This is one of the best shows they've done in so long, and it's the sort of show they should have been doing last year which was we're elevating guys, we're trying to create new stars, we're putting younger guys over, we're building this whole new future for this company. And it's sad because it's the last thing they're going to do. Like the match we just gone there, they're crowning cruiserweight tag team champions. They've had this amazing tournament and now they've got this amazing finals in which the younger guys went over. Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo won it over the established Billy Kidman and Rey Mysterio. Everyone assumed that Mysterio and Kidman were going to win. No, we're elevating new guys. So sort of show they should have done a year previous. The Invasion it's mind-boggling to go back and watch. And in fact, if you're interested in that sort of thing, the Attitude Era podcast are currently chronicling it. They've just started with King of the Ring 2001, and they're going to be going on from there. I feel like I plug that podcast a lot.
You do.
In almost every episode of the WrestleRamble, but it's a very good podcast. And I've been watching those 2001 Raws with quite some interest because I watched it a lot. I watched it when I was there at the time. Just going back and watching it now with hindsight 2020, 16 years later, it's even more interesting because every episode you're like, they've had to go back to the drawing board. So you're watching it and you're like, okay, cool. This is where you could see the plan was going. This is the direction they were heading. Something on that show didn't work. So they were like, right, scrap everything. We're starting again. So then you watch the next show and you're like, okay, so now we're heading down this direction. And then something on that show didn't work. Like, scrap everything. Let's start again on the next one. Now we're going to go down this direction. And it's just fascinating to watch everything just fall apart week by week by week until we got the Invasion, which was Sean Stasiak and Chuck Palumbo and all these WCW no-names that no one cared about. And it just made them look like chumps week in, week out. It's startling to watch. And the biggest waste of money. Invasion, the pay-per-view itself, it's the biggest pay-per-view they've done that's not a WrestleMania. Because it shows that even with that depleted WCW roster, and they brought in ECW at the very last minute to try and bolster this up, and we're going to do this big 5-on-5 WWF versus WCW and ECW main event, which was mostly ECW guys. But actually, when you look at that ring, they were all WWF guys. Because you had the 5 WWF guys in the corner, the Dudley Boys and Rhino. You're like, okay, cool. Well, they've been WWF guys for so long now. Well, not Rhino in particular, but the Dudley Boys certainly. DDP and Booker T, who have just got here. Like it's not representative of what that war should have been. And it's such a shame. But people were interested, but they squandered all their opportunities.
But the Invasion was just one big time ultimate payoff to WCW versus WWF. I'm talking about the biggest missed thing would have been this competition forever. But Luke, that is all we've got time for, I'm afraid.
That's fair enough.
So please click the videos that have just appeared over Luke's face to catch up with the latest episodes of WrestleRamble or the WrestleTalk news. Support WrestleTalk on Patreon. Of course, download the podcast and subscribe to this YouTube channel. This has been Luke Owen. I've been Ollie Davis, and that was Rambling.